Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to CEASD presentation today. The rules of the game are not changing. Please have the cameras off. If you would like to ask a question later, we can have the cameras back on, of course. But today, please, we have the pleasure of introducing our presentation today, Dr. Gloshonda Lawyer. It's been a long, amazing resume. And we haven't actually shared it all with you, but I just would like to mention that she has a long-standing, beautiful resume. Gloshonda has been in deaf education for many years. She's been working with early child education, K through 12, and post-secondary education level. She has a BA degree in deaf studies and linguistics, and an MED as well, and special education with emphasis on deaf teaching and deaf education and early childhood education, both from universities, from Minnesota. She also earned her PhD in education from the University of Tennessee. Her area of expertise, and this is it, working with the community as grassroots organizations, getting people together to mobilize together, fighting for disability justice, language justice, as well as the emphasis on providing the best access to deaf education and deaf education situations. She has a deep research within multilingual and multimodal languages in development, and analysis of the systems and the power that are in play. Understanding colonization and how it impacts the teaching system. And a lot of experience with deaf education system as well. And we're excited to hear from her today. Please think thoroughly about your questions and how we can go ahead and dismantle the barriers that we face within the education system, especially for all children, staff, and especially for undeserved and mostly multi-marginalized representation of individuals. Secondly, I want to make our classroom more inclusive. And what does it take to have equity, and what does that look like within our deaf schools? So with that, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Gloshonda Lawyer. Welcome. Hello, everyone. My name is Gloshonda. Thank you so much for hosting this event today. I'm really thrilled to go ahead and share everything with you all today. So I will go ahead and share my PowerPoint at this moment. So one moment. And please be patient with me just for a short moment. Technology, you have to go ahead and get used to that transition. Okay. Thank you for your patience and waiting for the access team. So I'd like to go ahead and open with the land acknowledgement and just show gratitude. Today I'm actually giving this presentation on the unceded lands of the Ute. The tribe, I recognize the original stewards of the land, which is the Ute, the Shoshone, the Paiute, and the Goshute. These are the tribes. They have since been taking care of these lands. They are the stewards. They have cared for this land, and they live in the right relationship with this land prior to the years of colonization and many mass genocide. So please, I encourage you all to go ahead and learn as to what lands you are on. What is your position to the land, especially for people who have been taking care of this land prior to the colonization. We do have a link here within this slide, and I can go ahead and share that with you after the presentation. And I encourage you to learn more about the lands yourself. Also, I just want to take a moment of mourning and recognition. It's important for us to go ahead and take a pause and to honor the life, the recent killing of this Black man. His name is Duante Wright. And just mourn his unjust murder by the Brooklyn Center police officer in Minnesota. And that killing was not justice. I also want to pause for a moment for the recent treatment of Andrea, short for Dre, Hollingsworth, and being handcuffed and denied communication access from the police. While being handcuffed, the officers forced her twins to interpret the interaction. They denied her access to an interpreter there as well. Duante's death and Dre's experience with the police, those two show a lineage of many people the lives have taken, and Dre's experience of traumatization, damaged by the systems, those systems that have fully yet to accept us as a full human being. And if that system has not to accept us, they also do not accept Black, Indigenous, peoples of color, immigrants, disabled, deaf people, LGBTQIA plus individuals, and many more marginalized communities. Really, I just want to give a pause right now. Thank you. So today I will go ahead and explain as to who I am briefly. First, the image description. I'm a Black woman, femme. I have a black hair, curls and up in a bun, and I have a blue sweater on, a blue shirt. Maybe it looks black at this moment on your screen. And I'm standing in front of a virtual background, and the virtual background is Black. I am a teacher. I am an activist. I am a community member. I am a mother. I am a sibling. I am a daughter. And I am Black, Indigenous. And I am Latinx. I am hard of hearing, interpreter. I'm a researcher. Various identities that I hold that I am bringing within you in this space for this presentation today. So that's just my work in general of what I bring. On the left picture, you may see there is a Black woman with a baby with a generation on her back, gold hoop earrings. And the quote says, "The flowers are lovely, but I'd prefer a revolution." I just really liked that, really resonates with who I am. And that really how we confront the system and how the system constantly oppresses me and our people. And that's how I label myself. I identify as an abolitionist. That is my sign for abolition. And what that means that the systems that are in place are not uplifting people. It does not benefit us, our communities. The system has to be dismantled. Also, on the right picture, we have two images. I'm also involved with reproductive justice as well. So that means it's important for all bodies, all deaf, disabled, immigrants, individuals, Black, Indigenous peoples should have access to appropriate health care for birthing their children. You know, the system does not have access to deciding. The system has often controlled our bodies and how we decide to birth our children. So the point of my presentation today, my work is not a limitation to race. I want to emphasize that. Everything that you see here on the slide, I approach gender, class, language, skin color, disability, religion, immigration, Alana, which is various identities that I hold within my work, and sexual orientation. So how do I embody within this space? I have a language of ASL and spoken and written English. Today I have 3 interpreters here with me. So that is our collective support. If you don't mind, I would like to go ahead the interpreters to put on the screen so they may see and honor them, this 3 for today. Thank you so much, Trisha. Thank you, William. And thank you so much, Travis. All 3 of us are working together. We do work often together a lot. And many interpreters I would like to honor and allow our differences and our diversity as a community to show up as their full selves. And they can go ahead and also embody that language. All right, go ahead. You can turn off your videos now. In this space, I would like to use I statements. This means we cannot discuss another individual's experience. Please avoid that. Please speak from your own experience and your own opinions. And I also would like to state what is shared here. Any statements, maybe relating to a family or a friend member, those stories must stay here in confidentiality. But whatever you learn from here, you may share with others, and that's fine. Please go ahead and do that. And next, please always state your name before commenting. And if you decide to go ahead and put on your video, please go ahead and provide an image description. Last, collectivity and rejecting capitalistic grind culture. Please. I'm a mother. I have children. I am working from home, which means maybe I have to pull my attention in taking my children and my child. So please don't feel like we're in a rush, that time is running out, or what are we doing, please. But just take a moment for yourself to breathe and pause. I know capitalism wants us to go ahead and feel that we have to be productive all day long and every day, at any moment. Just we have to honor ourselves. We are human bodies. So now I will go ahead and and I will go ahead and voice for the rest of my presentation. And thank you so much for the interpreters. They'll go ahead and sign for me. This is today's topic, leveraging multiple lenses for justice in deaf education.
Our topic for today is leveraging multiple lenses for justice in deaf education. So, before we start, I want to have a temperature check. Who's in the room? So, this is a Mentimeter poll. You can use your phone, you can use an iPad, and just take a picture of this barcode. When you do, it will take you to a site where you can fill out information. Here, we want to know who you are. How do you identify yourself based on your language background? You can also pick based on your race, based on your professional context. Are you in higher ed, K 12, early intervention? And how many years of experience do you have in the field? So it will take just a moment here to get responses in of who's in the room. Okay, I see female superintendent, mother of deaf children. Superintendent just got bigger. That means we have more individuals who identify with superintendent. Male, 32 years in deaf ed, 30 years school administrator, CODA, executive director, 47 years in the field. Wow, congratulations. Okay, awesome. Caucasian, white male, yes, love, CEO, amazing. Okay, thank you for sharing. Thank you. So, with that, we want to look at culturally sustaining pedagogy. And culturally sustaining pedagogy comes from a long line of what we call asset pedagogies or resource pedagogies. So in the 1990s, there was a move to bring in asset pedagogies because we realized that educational outcomes for racialized students, and by racialized, that means any student we look at as Black, Indigenous, a person of color, who may or may not have identified with the race before they came to the United States, but now in this country, they are labeled by a race. So that's why we use the term racialized. And minoritized students. So the focus was to change professionals, their perceptions of these students. So there was a lot of narratives that these students are failing, these students are not having enough English skills, these students can't pass standardized tests, etc. From that, the asset pedagogies were developed. And these include culturally congruent pedagogy, which was in 1994, culturally relevant pedagogy around 1995, and culturally responsive pedagogy. So that was our shift from deficit approaches, where we labeled students and their home practices as inferior, to the next level, where we recognize these students as different, but they're still not succeeding, to where we are now, asset pedagogies, where we say these students have home and community practices that we need to leverage in order for them to be more successful at English and in schools academically and or on standardized tests. So this is a good thing, but those approaches are still flawed because we only focus on student culture and student language for the sake of accessing dominant culture and language, which is English, reading, writing, speaking. So, culturally sustaining pedagogy comes in as an asset pedagogy, but it focuses on supporting multilingual and multicultural practices in education, addressing historic and contemporary contexts of schooling, valuing practices that students have, not just for access to dominant culture, but valuing them because they are worthy of being valued. And also, it calls for community based accountability. So, one thing that I noticed is that deaf education has been falling in the same pitfalls as the previous sets of asset pedagogies. We focus on teaching deaf children, training professionals to support deaf children to access English, to access academic content, but we also forget that our students are also Black, Indigenous, people of color. They're also LGBTQIA plus. They're also immigrants, and many of our students use languages that are not standard English at home. And this is an important point because often there's a comment of just because we have deaf-blind, deaf-disabled, or hard of hearing, or cochlear implant users who use English and are students of color, they actually use different dialects. For example, I grew up, I did have English access in my home, but it was not standard English, which meant any time that I was reading and writing, I was adapting my language practices to perform in standard English. So we have to remember that from a linguistic perspective, if you use a dialect that is not the standard accepted dialect, this is considered a separate language practice that we should honor as well. So, what are the benefits of using and approaching our instruction from asset pedagogy, like culturally sustaining pedagogy? Uh, One study reviewed asset pedagogies across the board and found that these approaches bring student life experience to the classroom, and then those experiences can become a source of knowledge building for content areas. It also showed that there was improved performance in content areas, and they measured that with standardized tests. I'm not a supporter of standardized tests. We can talk for days about how these tests are not created for various populations of students and how these tests uphold ableism, which distinguishes who is superior and who is inferior based on how their mind can perform and based on how you can perform on a standard one set approach of measuring intelligence. So we won't go into that discussion today, but there was improved performance based on standardized tests in school. And they also found that teachers had a better understanding of student experiences, and that resulted in teachers having better relationships with their students. So I think it's important to emphasize here that asset pedagogies, though we mention the students, have never been about the students. It has always been about the professionals. The goal of asset pedagogies is to shift the teachers, school administrators, policymakers, any professionals that work with students. We want to shift how they view these students and how they embrace these students' language and cultural practices. So now I want to take a pause and check if there are any questions right now or any comments related to perceived barriers or tensions with what I have just shared with you. So you can type your responses in the chat, but if you want them to be more confidential, um, you can definitely type in the Mentimeter using the QR code. And if there are no areas of tension or questions, we can keep moving forward. So I will pause for 1 minute. Okay, so there's one question. How can we celebrate the backgrounds of our students and staff? It's interesting because I did not mention that there are several levels to this, right? So you have a level of let's say we have celebratory months like October is Latinx Heritage Month. We have Native American and Indigenous Month in November. We have Black History in February. But I would say we want to move beyond that and think of ways to engage in these cultures and backgrounds in everything that we do. So, do you have lessons that require books that are written by authors from different backgrounds? Do your classroom content reflect disabilities? Do you have that posted in your classrooms? Are you teaching about that to your students? For example, I remember teaching one course on language acquisition at higher education level for future teachers of the deaf and future educational interpreters. And at one point, I was signing one handed while holding something in my other hand. And the students complained that it's difficult to understand the signing with one hand. And my question to them was, had they ever met a person who uses sign language but only has one hand? And they didn't believe that such a person could exist. And so I brought that into my classroom content. There are many people who only have one hand and who use a sign language as their primary language. This is part of the biodiversity of, our world. So as educators, as interpreters, we have to be used to this as normal. This has to be our normal. So I would say it's not just about celebrating backgrounds, it's about us bringing these content, bringing diverse perspectives so that it becomes normal for our students, for our staff, for our future teachers and educators and speech language pathologists, etc. Let's see. Another question is, what can you do when you lead a school and have a hard time finding diverse staff to meet our diverse student population? I think that's an excellent question. And I get asked that a lot. And what I say is, diverse people come where they feel welcome. And so I have personally worked in a place where I was at the time the only Black teacher. Um, And so, how do we create environments that attract diverse staff people? And until we do create those environments, we have all this amazing technology. I think, if anything, COVID experience this year has taught us that there are a lot of inequities we have to address, such as internet access. It's not equal for all people, for one. But when we provide those basic things that we all need, we can bring a diverse world right to our phones, to our living rooms, to our classrooms, and connect with people from all over the place. So I encourage everyone to use that as a starting point. Also, there's a comment of not an area of tension, but I appreciate the reminder of how our country was founded on stolen land. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you for commenting that. Um, Practices like that. I know 2 years ago, land acknowledgments were not mainstream. And I don't want to say mainstream as a positive thing because we don't want to just perform these things without actually embodying the full weight and meaning of what they are. But even land acknowledgments in your classrooms or with your university students can lead to questions. Oh, why did you do that? What is a land acknowledgement for? And that leads to lessons, and that's a whole nother set of diverse experiences because no indigenous tribe is like another one. So now we have a set of diverse experiences we can explore together with our students. Awesome. So now I want to shift and expand. um, I love culturally sustaining pedagogy, but I don't feel it's necessarily enough. And so disability justice and language justice are two frameworks that I would like to invite into this space. Disability justice is a framework that was developed back in the early 2000s by disabled queers and activists of color. So I encourage you to look at this link, Since Invalid. Amazing resource, transformative, powerful, what they have been doing and what they continue to do. Some of these individuals who created the framework have since became ancestors. They have passed on or died. And so we want to honor them for what they have given us to move forward in healing and acceptance of disability in all of its beauty and its challenges, and encouraging us to continue to address systems um, that seek to problematize disability. So, this framework understands that all bodies are unique and essential. All bodies have strengths and needs that must be met. We are powerful not despite our complexities, but because of them. And all bodies are confined by ability, race, gender, sexuality, class, nation state, religion, and more. And we cannot separate these things. So there are 10 principles to disability justice, and I won't jump into all of them today, but I encourage you to read Sins and Valleys page. I also recently wrote a chapter on how I applied disability justice to my higher education classroom and what that experience was like being in a space with mostly abled people who were also from individualistic cultures and did not always recognize the benefit of um, applying disability justice in our classroom. But they are briefly here. So we have intersectionality, leadership of those most impacted, anti capitalism, cross movement organizing, wholeness, sustainability, cross disability solidarity, interdependence, interdependence, correction, collective access, and collective liberation. Now, language justice. So, language justice is also a framework that has been around for quite some time. And there's not a set definition for what language justice is, but I pulled some quotes here, and there's also a link document that's here. I'll share with you all at the end. That provides a toolkit for how to embody language justice in your spaces. So these quotes are what I feel a good definition for language justice. It is a commitment to building and sustaining multilingual spaces. Also recognizes the social and political dimensions of language and language access. Language justice includes working to dismantle language barriers, equalize power dynamics, and build strong communities for social and racial justice. So, why are disability justice and language justice compatible with culturally sustaining pedagogy? I think it's important for us to acknowledge that schools are one of the central places of what I define as colonization in schools, where we are indoctrinated as staff, as professionals, as students into valuing performance, certain bodies, and certain minds. So, disability justice with language justice and culturally sustaining pedagogy allow us to address schools as sites of historic and contemporary trauma. Therefore, those are sites that are in need of targeted social justice interventions. Those interventions will help us to value all bodies and minds as they are, regardless of what they can contribute to society. So that is our anti-capitalistic capitalism, where we're taught that we must become productive members of society. We must contribute something to society. But our value is not limited to that. So what if I can't contribute to society? Am I not human? Am I not worthy of being embraced in full humanity? So these three frameworks help us in that sense. Regardless of what you can or can't give to this society, you're still worthy. Also, it helps us to uplift what our students can do, but encourages interdependence for areas of needed support. Often in special education, we have a strong emphasis on independence. What can you do independently? How to make a child independent in this area, how to transition to independent living, etc. Most of our students are from collective cultures. So, from that perspective, when we go into schools, that is where we learn to be individualistic. That is where we learn competition, where we learn um, to be independent. But our communities encourage us to lean on one another, depend on one another. So, disability justice with culturally sustaining pedagogy honors that and encourages that. Recognize what your limits are, and those are fine because it's who you are. Now, how do you seek supports for those areas? Who can you trust to support you in those areas? Now, learn to do that. Thank you. These three frameworks also help us to value all of the language practices by deaf-blind, deaf-disabled, hard of hearing, and cochlear implant users. Whether it's sign language, tactile language, spoken language, a spoken language other than English, a sign language other than ASL, maybe LSM, sign language from another country, whether it's all of the above, value those, embrace those, and leverage those for learning. This is also related to a concept called trans languaging, TransLanguaging, trans languaging. Hopefully, the captioning caught that. And so that embraces all of our language practices, encourages us to use them all for learning, expressing ourselves, embodying our cultures, etc. Also, these frameworks help us to shift the focus and we start to challenge dominant societal narratives. So now we're not focused on fixing or habilitating the deaf, deaf-blind, deaf-disabled, hard of hearing, or cochlear implant user into becoming a monolingual person, English spoken or written. We are now focusing on a society that makes being deaf a problem, that makes being deaf blind a problem, that makes being deaf disabled a problem. So now we're saying, what can we do in society to make everyone have language access, cultural access, social capital, all of these benefits that are normally given to certain people? How do we make that accessible to all without trying to mold this person into something something or someone that they aren't, and devaluing who they are? We also center the communities as sources of knowledge instead of uplifting professionals as experts in these experiences. There's nothing wrong with being a professional in the field. I'm also a professional in the field. But we want to look to those who have the lived experience and learn from them. How do we help support a child to become their best deaf self, their best deaf disabled self? Um, and by best, I mean fully embracing their identities, their racial identities, their disabled or non disabled identities. How do we help them embrace their religious identities and have access to all of those things without tapping into their communities? We have to do that. So we value the community first as the primary source of knowledge. And our role is supporting our students in getting to that place and having full access to those sources of knowledge and participation in those cultures and communities. So I mentioned schools as a site for targeted interventions because of trauma. And I want to take a pause here to feel the room. What are your initial feelings or responses to that as individuals who have gone through schooling systems in the United States, as professionals, as parents? I'm curious what your responses are, and you can feel free to type in the chat. Okay, I'm not seeing any responses. So I can assume that there are no areas of tension and that we are all in agreement that schools have been sources of trauma for certain groups of individuals in the United States. So, one social justice intervention that I have proposed is what I call the decolonizing intersectionality framework. On the right, based on my research for my dissertation, what was found after interviewing 25 deaf, deafblind, deaf disabled, hard of hearing individuals about their schooling experience here in the United States. These individuals were also racialized. They're also, some were immigrants, some were part of the LGBTQIA plus communities. And all of them came from homes where English was not the primary language, or they used a different dialect of English. And their experience was autism, ableism, linguicism, and I should be clear, ableism is the upholding of specific types of bodies and minds, what we consider not disabled, and also wanting individuals to be non-disabled. It's a lot deeper than that, but there are many, many sources that have written on that. Linguicism is oppression based on not using the dominant language of society, of a given society. Anti-blackness is larger than racism. And so it's not just being discriminated against because of the skin, the color of your skin. It's a belief system that seeks to limit the movement of Black individuals or people of color, that seeks to box us in to certain fields, certain lines of thought. For example, why I made it clear in the beginning of my presentation that I am not a race scholar. Race is not what I do. Because often when you see a person of color or a Black person who mention issues of race, it is assumed that their work is about race. No, our work can encompass several fields. And so anti-Blackness is a belief system, it's an ideology that's not limited to race or skin color, and it actually is pervasive on a global level, which it was important to discuss this in that study because, as I said, some of the individuals were immigrants. Vidism is the uplifting of sightedness, being able to see. Distantism is the belief that we should navigate this world using our distant senses of sight and hearing. So when we have a deafblind student, for example, why are we resistant to allowing them to touch? And this is even seen in early childhood classrooms. I was a teacher, birth to three, and then I also taught preschool. And often you see professionals tell students, don't touch the book when we're reading, right? We pass it around. Everyone look with your eyes, not with your hands. And so we train these belief systems. And that is why I say schools are primary sites for indoctrinating us. Also, we found homophobia and xenophobia, among other types of oppression, were the experiences of these research contributors. So, for me to address that, I feel we have to look at colonization and address why we are taught to uplift certain identities, experiences, ways of being, and subordinate or try to erase certain other ways of being. And we have to address it at the educational policy level, the higher education level, including how we train teachers and interpreters, how we do research, and what research questions we're analyzing. Because we have to be real, not every research question is appropriate. Not every researcher is appropriate to do that research. And then we also have to analyze in K-12 schooling context. Well, I should say birth to 12 schooling context. So, what is the role of higher education and school leadership? I shared a lot today, but trying to get down to the real hands on stuff. Um, One, I feel we have to analyze our positions To be in higher education, myself included, I came from a poor family, farm girl, first person in my family to receive bachelor's degree, first person to pursue graduate school, first person to receive a PhD. So everything that I experienced beyond 12th grade was new and groundbreaking for my family, but it also gave me new levels of privilege that no one else in my family had ever experienced, new levels of access and social capital that I can use appropriately to dismantle systems that seek to prevent certain people from having access, or I can be complicit in the system and just use my access for myself. So we have to analyze our own positions. Also, we have to make these frameworks core values of our programs in words and actions. I've seen a lot of statements released after last year's uprisings, after a lot more issues have been publicized in the media, and now school personnel and now school program administrators are ready to release statements, but they still have not embodied those statements, possibly with their own staff, with their own students. And so it's important that our actions are in alignment with our statements. By embodying these practices, what do I mean? For example, I have here a syllabus statement from when I was teaching at a higher ed institution. This was a core practice, and all of my students knew from day one. Because I believe in language justice, because I believe in disability justice, I expect that every assignment in my class will have those frameworks applied. So I had three components. Every assignment was in one or all three of these categories: professional dispositions and attitudes. What is your willingness to self reflect and unpack your thoughts and feelings related to issues of justice? This takes into consideration how how your position impacts student learning and the field of deaf education at large. Demonstration demonstration of content knowledge. That's your ability to explain in ASL or and written English, because we were a bilingual program. It's important that I can witness their ability to navigate both languages to express course content and learning. So, what can you show me that you've learned based on course lectures, readings, activities, and classroom discussions? And the last part was demonstration of competencies, and that's in class and assignments, basically hands-on activities showing that you know the material. So all of my students knew from day one. If they weren't ready to embody these, then they weren't ready for my class, because these were required to pass the class. Um, so having these practices, as I said, not just built into words saying we are a bilingual program, but we only do all of our work in English, right? Or saying we are a program that values social justice, but we never force our students to unpack their own identities, their own experiences, and how that might impact their future students, then we're not putting it to action. And also, we have to build strong connections with adults who have the lived experiences and allow ourselves to be accountable to the communities that we are preparing professionals to work in, or the communities that we ourselves work in. That means if our programs are engaging in practices that are not supported by the community, how do we shift those practices to be in alignment with what the community is looking for? How do we dialogue with the community in ways that allows them to know that they are equally valued, even if they don't have, quote, the professional expertise that we are supposed to have? So I want to pause to look at the chat because I noticed some comments came in. One comment is that we are struggling with addressing tensions, especially with COVID 19 last year. There is stress on individuals, and there have been a lot of social movements happening around the country that contributes to our thinking and responses. There's also a lot of self exploration that is happening for everyone. Yes, I agree. I agree. A lot of self exploration is happening. Another comment says encouraging student interdependence rather than independence is a new concept for me as an educator. Yes, I agree. I agree because I remember before I was a conscious practitioner of disability justice, I had gone through special education programs. I had worked as a behavioral therapist for children, for autistic children in their homes doing early intervention. And all of my training, again, using I statements because I cannot attest to you all's training, but all of my training was special education, was our goal is to help our students be independent, and we work to build skills so they can do things on their own. We look at family priorities. What is important for you for this child to do independently? What is important for you for the child to engage with the family? Um, but we put so much burden on the children, right? When we are dependent beings, we we can compare, ourselves to, let's say, an animal in the forest, right? Who else rears their children for 18 plus years? Who else I mean, I'm presenting now, I have my sleeping baby in my arm. That's interdependence. Why would we not teach our students the value of that? Because they can't go through life on an island. They can't go through life on their own. And so it's important to teach everyone to recognize what we can do and what we can't do. That's healthy. Self awareness, self analysis, it's healthy. Um, and from that, how do you find your support systems? How do you know who is safe to rely on, to trust, to be vulnerable with? These are the skills we should be teaching, instead of saying press through on your own. You have to do this on your own. And again, I also think that's rooted in capitalism because you have to have a winner and a loser. You have to have a top and a bottom. And if we're depending on one another, I can't I can't view you as I'm codependent on you and you're codependent on me, but one of us has to be top and one of us has to be inferior. So capitalism makes it very hard for us to accept interdependence. That's my point. Another comment says, I think our leaders and teachers want to do the right thing, but are not always sure of the best way to proceed. Everyone is learning. Yes, this is a fact. And again, I don't think we all have to have the answers. I don't have all the answers. Every day is a learning process for me. Um, every day. And so I think, again, going back to interdependence and also recognizing that we are unlearning what systems have taught us to accept as normal. So that unlearning process is going to have um, points of doubt, points of uncertainty, because it's a different way from what we've ever experienced. So I would say sit with that uncertainty, reach out to community members, reach out to these amazing resources that are now available online, amazing leaders who are available, through social media, who are always answering questions and willing to support. We have so many ways to grow and grow together that we should take advantage of for our own sake and for our students' sake. And another comment, um, there is a tension between how to seek support versus needing to be independent to succeed. It's definitely something we can explore. Yes. Okay. Thank you so much for your comments so far and for posting in our little Mentimeter poll. And now I just want to open for any open discussion or questions before we move to close out.
Lashana, I thought you had a wonderful presentation. It led me to a lot of thinking about, for example, my students. And then this year we've been doing a lot of different things. But for me, I'm on a task force for diversity. And right now in our discussion, we really want to focus on diversity in general in the school, especially here in New York. We've been seeing that there are more task forces on diversity popping up, and they're struggling to figure out how to step up or, what the appropriate thing to do for the school is. So, there's a lot of, for example, distractions that we'll call it distractions. So finally, we decided that we were going to bring in a lot of different people to start to build up that framework for the school. But there's a lot of emotional labor that's involved, a lot of thinking that's involved. And I think, it'll take time before people are able to really embrace that part of the school environment and the culture as well. And in addition, I want to mention that in the past, staff have brought in, we've met at where people have met students, and honestly, everyone is everyone's having a hard time now, and especially building knowledge and teaching our students that in the future that would be a best place for everyone. So that's what I wanted to comment on.
Thank you so much for your comment. Yes.
Definitely, definitely difficult process. And I think sometimes we forget about how emotional this can become because we're challenging our own belief systems, right? Some of us have had these belief systems for 20, 30, 40, 50 years of our lives. Um, and that's very personal. And so it's important for us to remember we have to put certain things on the table when we're starting this type of work. One, I tell people it will be messy. This will not be easy. You will cry over this. You will have a hard time letting go of some of your beliefs. But we have to remember we're building for future generations. Also, we are adults. We have already succeeded or overcome our individual barriers to get to where we are today. Our students have not yet, so they still have a future to obtain. How can we make that way, that path, easier for them, lighter for them? That means I can't think about what my feelings are because I'm an adult. It's not about me anymore. It's about them. Um, and I think that's the hard part, moving outside of our own selves. So when we get to the point that everyone, all of the stakeholders can feel that same way, that's when I start to see momentum um, grow and progress starts to happen. But it takes a lot to get there. I also, when working with teams, I share with them about implementation research and basically stating we can try something now, we can launch something today. We won't know if that's successful for about 3 years. And that's with consistency among the team. That's with making sure we have buy in. That's with having adequate support systems. And we're doing this work. And in 3 years or so, we can say, oh, yeah, this was successful because of this. But if we can't even invest that 3 years, we will never be able to know if our approaches work or not. So I try to share implementation research anytime we're doing this type of work, just to prepare those involved for the road ahead and the work ahead.
Thank you again for your presentation. A lot to consider. Thank you.
I just want to say that this presentation was inspiring and overwhelming. I think, like Jeff, there are so many things to think about. One of the things that I feel like we're experiencing with all of the disruptions and challenges that we've all lived this year is the fact that, you know, maybe it's oversimplification, but we have so much to learn and so much to unlearn. And I think the tension between what we have to learn and what we have to unlearn sometimes feels overwhelming. But what I loved about your presentation is that you gave us some specific things that we can think about and just constantly remember that this is going to be a long process. As long as it took to create a world without social justice and without justice for disabilities and justice for language, it may take us, hopefully not, but may take us that long to remove it. So I'm almost, listening to you, I almost want to run out and get with my racial equity task force and start brainstorming like crazy about things we can do. But I just wanted to say, acknowledge Jeff's comment on what a struggle we've had. And now we have to struggle some more to do this work, but we have to do it. And I want to thank you so much for your presentation today. Are there any more questions from people? If not, we're getting close to the 2:00 closing time. I want to make sure I don't overlook anyone that has a question or a comment. Okay, with that, thank you again for your time and for sharing this presentation. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here today and with you all.